This video is going to give you a bird's eye view into a psychological organization that's drenched in gynocentrism. When I say drenched in gynocentrism, just what do I mean by that? Well, what we're talking about is the interest in the needs and wants of women and girls and a disinterest in the same thing for men and boys. And sadly, you see this all over the place. You know, whether it's your homeowners association or the local government or federal government or the charity downtown, you see the same stuff embedded into each bureaucratic element. It's all there. This gynocentric drenching that's there. And it leaves us with a lopsided culture, one that we really need to try and balance. Because, you know, it's okay to look for and to help women and girls, but you need to balance that by doing it for both men and women, not just one sex. So we'll have a look at this psychological organization. And, you know, it reminds me of Bones on the Beach. And the video will tell you why that does. Let's start with a story, an old story about Odysseus. Odysseus was on his travels, and some wise people told Odysseus, be careful when you go by this one island because there are sirens there. And if you hear their song, you're finished. You will end up with just bones on their beach. They will kill you if you listen. Well, Odysseus was not a faint of heart, and he decided, you know, he would like to know a way to listen to him without being killed. So what he did was he had all of his men put beeswax in their ears so they couldn't hear a thing, and he had them lash him to the mast. So he's tied to the mast of the boat as they go by these sirens who sing their song. And he told his men, no matter what you do, never ever untie me until we're way out of the way of these sirens. So he heard the siren song, and he begged his men, please take me down, please take me down. They wouldn't do it. They kept rowing, rowing, and rowing. So Odysseus was the only man who ever heard those songs without being killed. He found a way to be able to survive listening to those songs. And I think that story tells us something about today's world. Because, you know, since about 1960 or so, we've heard songs that no one can resist. Those songs are the feminist songs. The songs of women saying they're tied to the tracks. Please, please come help me. I'm in deep trouble. Please come help. And there's almost no one who's really able to resist those cries. I mean, think about it. The media fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And in some ways, you can almost understand the media falling for it because they sold more stories. They sold more magazines. You know, if they go along with this whole idea of, you know, women are victims and women are hurt and these bad men are doing this terrible thing, they sell more product, right? So in some ways you can understand the media, but the politicians heard the siren song and they caved right in and they became bones on the beach. They followed this song and they could not turn away. They could not say no. You know, some people say the politician never heard a feminist demand that he could say no to. And that's just about right. Hopefully in the near future we're going to shift that around a little bit and make it more just. But as of the past 30 or 40, 50 years, what's been happening? Every song they hear about women need this and women need that, they cave in and they give it. And to say no would have been their death. They would have been bones on the beach yet again. But it's not just the media and entertainment. The judicial system, gosh, the family courts, bones on the beach. I mean, these people have just heard the siren song, and that's all they can hear. They only think of the sirens. They don't think of the men who are being left out. Family courts, boom, bones on the beach, just disdain for the needs of men and catering to the needs of women. Entertainment industry is another place, same kind of thing. Everything is about women. All the movies about female heroes, female this, female that, and making men look stupid. Bones on the beach. Gosh, the academia is another place. Jeez, crazy stuff. You know, the women's studies thing, sirens singing their song on the campus. No one can turn them away. No one can say no. All of our academic people are like bones on the beach. They can't deal with this women's study stuff. They agree with it no matter what. In fact, that's going to be what we're going to talk about today. And we're going to talk about the psychological aspect of all this and how the psychological people went along with all the others, the media, the entertainment, the educational system, the politicians, all of them. Your psychologists went along with the same thing. They heard that siren song and they won't quit being able to take care of women and forget about the men. And you can see this in a lot of ways. One way you can see it in the whole idea of toxic masculinity, which we'll be working with as we go along. But before that, you can see it in the psychological entities themselves. If you look at the APA, the American Psychological Association has what they call Division 51. Division 51 is a place where it's supposed to be about the study of men and masculinity. Well, I signed up to be a part of their mailing list back in 2008, I think, something like that. And I was not prepared for what I was going to find. You know, I was thinking that, yeah, there's probably a lot of feminists there, but there's maybe some other people there. There's going to be a mix. There's going to be good discussions. No. You know, these people were completely and utterly dedicated to the feminist ideas. You know, their mission statement itself. Have a look at it. Okay, the mission statement will tell you quite a bit. Look at the first bullet. Promotes the critical study of how gender shapes and constricts men's lives. So they start by admitting they aren't really studying men and how they're wonderfully different. They're studying gender and how it impacts men. That should be a huge tip-off. But worse, look at the fourth bullet. Acknowledges its historical debt to feminist-inspired scholarship on gender and commits itself to the support of groups such as women, gays, lesbians, and people of color that have been uniquely oppressed by the gender, class, race system. Oh boy. They're telling you that, again, this is not a study of men's unique qualities. It's going to be about how men have oppressed others. It also tells you that they're beholden to feminists, the same people who blame men for the problems of the world. Bones on the beach. Well, I introduced myself in this mailing list, and I was really welcomed nicely. The number of the people there had read my first book, Swallowed by a Snake. They liked it, surprisingly so. And so I got a warm welcome and felt pretty good for the first day or two. But after that, it got a little sticky because guess what? They found out that I was pushing the idea that men are good. And that didn't go very far in this environment. Why? Because these folks are thinking, no, it's not that men are good. It's that women are good and men are bad. Men need to change. Gosh, there was this one guy who wrote this message and everyone agreed. And what he said was, the world will be a better place when men can learn how to be more like women. Oh boy, think about that for a while. The world will be a better place when men can learn to be more like women. This was the general stance that this group took. In fact, if you ever criticized feminism, you were in deep doo-doo. And of course, I was in deep doo-doo all the time because I would criticize feminism. I would talk about the goodness of men. I would talk about testosterone maybe being an important part of the research that they could do, because these are the people in this group who are, one was the past president of the APA. They're the researchers that you hear their names from the media, because it's the media goes out to these people to ask them about issues of gender. These are the movers and shakers, and they don't like to hear the idea that men is good because they've heard that siren song, and they can't really. I mean, in some ways, they've just been turned to bones on the beach. There's no flesh in these people. They don't see humanitarian ways of seeing things. They only see the feminist way. Well, there was one guy on this list who I liked, and he was pro-male. He was an interesting guy, and he stood up for men. And guess what? Within about, 2 months to my getting there, they kicked him out. They kicked him out. And guess why they kicked him out? You're not going to believe this. but it's true. They kicked him out because they said, literally, he talked about male victims of domestic violence too much. He talked about male victims of domestic violence too much. I mean, can you believe it? That's crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. Well, I scratched my head. Well, it turns out when they kicked him out, they didn't say anything. They just kind of kicked him out and didn't say a word, right? Ay, ay, ay. So I waited. I knew that they'd kicked him out, but I didn't say anything. I waited a week. I waited 2 weeks. And I think it was after about 2 weeks, I wrote a message to the list. And I said, has anybody seen so-and-so? You know, where I haven't seen him, where he just kind of disappeared. What's up? No one answered. No one said a word. They knew what had happened. They knew they'd kicked the guy out. They banned him from the list. He could no longer write or see what was on the list. They kicked him out. I waited another week. I wrote another message. You know, where is so-and-so? I have not heard him or seen anything. And finally they said, well, he's been ejected from the group. And of course, I asked why. And they, went back and forth about this, that, and the other. But, read this message that they wrote to me, and then we'll read the one that I wrote to them, and you'll get a sense of what this particular group was like. So after several weeks and some prodding from me, they admit to the list what they had done. Here's the message. It happened several weeks ago. It did not seem appropriate to inform the list, given that it involved one individual. The board did not undertake this lightly. There was lengthy discussion, and the end result was consistent with both APA and divisional policy regarding listserv practices. Okay, so their solution is to whack him in the middle of the night and not tell anyone. If we just don't say anything, maybe it will go away. Okay, wait a minute. These folks were all PhD psychologists and surely have some clinical training. You never terminate someone from a group without informing the remaining members. Never. That's just basic psychological grade school. You strive to alert those who are impacted, but not these folks. They remind me of a toddler who does something they know is wrong and simply hides it. So I wrote them this message. I'm finding this hard to believe. What was his offense? I can't remember seeing him write anything that would deserve to be banned from this list. This reminds me of a story I heard last week about Stalin. It seems that Stalin would float up and down the Volga River on a barge and stop at the cities along the way. He would invite local politicians onto the barge for discussions. Those who agreed with his position went back to their towns. Those who didn't were shot and dumped in the river, never to be heard from again. Stalin didn't bother to tell anyone. It only involved one individual, LOL. So they didn't like that message so much. And lots of messages were exchanged about this whole mess. And their basic idea was that he'd not answered the questions and was not backing up his claims with research. This, of course, was totally bogus, since all he had to do was to link to the Fiebert bibliography for hundreds of studies to back up his claims. They knew this, but simply couldn't tolerate his ideology and its difference from their own. He had to go. The bottom line is that they could not tolerate the message this person conveyed. This group had no ability to hear the viewpoints that differed from their own ideological position. They were bones on the beach. So not too long after that, maybe 6 months, 7, 8 months, they were tired of me, and so they kicked me out too. This was about, maybe a year or so after I started. I forget exactly when it was, but they kicked me out. And the reasons they kicked me out that they listed was that I was hostile. Well, I have saved every message I ever wrote to that group, and part of me wants to put all those messages up and have a contest. It's like, where's Waldo? Find the message that Golden sent that was hostile, because there is nothing. The closest thing to hostile was the message that I wrote to them about Stalin, but that wasn't so bad. But I was hostile, and therefore I was no longer acceptable to this group. And really, of course, what the problem was that I was saying things that they couldn't answer. I was saying things that were really challenging their viewpoints and the way they saw the world. And that was unacceptable. And the easier thing to do, rather than have to answer and to deal with me, was to just kick me out. So that's what they did. And the couple of the people on the list kept me informed about what happened since then, but I haven't really followed it too closely. But it is interesting to note that while I was there, some of these people in the group would write me. A lot of the people who didn't really comment at all and didn't write messages would write to me. Maybe 3 or 4 guys wrote and said, thank you very much for standing up for men. I wish I could support you, but I can't because my profession would be on the line. These guys could knock me out of my job in a heartbeat. So I started seeing the fear that these people live with. I'm guessing, this was just a small 3 or 4 people. But think about it. These guys had a lot of courage to write me because I could have turned around and published their email to that list and say, see what's happening? So they trusted me not to say anything. But that'd be a pretty big thing to trust, right? And if it was 3 or 4 that wrote to me, I wonder how many are out there that felt the same way, but couldn't say anything because they were too afraid of these bullies. And that's exactly what they are. They are bullies. They're going to let their way of seeing things stand, and anyone else who challenges that has got to go. And of course, this is the same thing we see with all the rest of the people who have heard the Siren Song. They won't hear anything else but their own song that they hear, and that's what's important to them. Okay, so what do we get from all of this? I think the most important thing to get is that we need to learn from Odysseus and learn how to tie ourselves to the mast, to learn how to be able to hear the very things that we think are dangerous. In fact, the very things that we think might kill us. We need to be able to hear that so we can take it in, weigh it, and decide for ourselves what's right. Because we're surrounded with people in our culture that cannot do that. Our politicians can't do it. The family courts can't do it. The feminists certainly can't do it. And we need to be able to do that for ourselves so that we can make good decisions based on that. There are some people who are able to do this, and the one that comes to my mind is Cassie J. Cassie J is a feminist who tied herself to the mast and listened to the pain of men for 2 years and came to her own conclusions that varied a great deal from her feminist beliefs. And she was able to take that data in, even though it was kind of dangerous to her. You can see in the red pill how it was dangerous to her, and she was able to struggle and take that in. That's what we need to be able to do. Whether it's in our relationships, whether it's in our work, our educational system, whether it's in our politics, we need to be able to tie ourselves to the mast and listen to that which we think might be dangerous and weigh it based on things. So I want to thank the people who've come to my Patreon site and supported me. I really appreciate that. It's been good, and I hope you guys will come and look. It's a place where you can go for very inexpensive. You can come support the work that I'm trying to do, and also ask direct questions there. And there'll be some things, or there are things now on the Patreon site that you can't get on YouTube, so you can only find them there. So come and see me there. And for goodness sakes, tie yourself to the mast. Practice tying yourself to the mast, and keep in mind that men are good, as are you. And comment, like, subscribe, and all the rest of that stuff.